Hey, babe, what are we talking about today?
Today we are joined by Chris Singleton, and I know it's going to be a great conversation because Chris is such an inspiration, and he is just putting himself all over the country with his speaking engagements and his message about love and unity. So, Chris, we are so excited to have you today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I am grateful to be hanging with you guys for sure.
I love it. Let's get into this bio so that everybody knows who Chris is and why we wanted to have this conversation with him today.
And I also feel as though, before we hop into the bio, that if the name doesn't ring a bell right off the top of your head, trust me, you know who this individual is.
Yes, yes. Unless you live under a rock, which is some of you might. I don't know. All right, let's get into this bio. I'm sure you will recognize the name. Chris Singleton is a former professional athlete drafted by the Chicago Cubs in 2017. Following the loss of his mother in a racially motivated mass shooting in Charleston, South Carolina in 2015, Chris has now become an inspirational speaker and best-selling author who has shared his message of unity and racial reconciliation with the NFL, NBA teams, as well as multiple Fortune 500 companies across the country. He shares with over 100 organizations and over 30,000 students annually. His most recent offerings are coaching consultations and professional coaching development. He resides with his spouse and his 2 sons in Charleston, South Carolina. Chris, thank you for being with us today.
Yes, thank you so much.
Absolutely. And one more thing, I'm also about to have my first daughter.
Oh,
What? Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Boy.
Congratulations.
I don't know how
thank
y'all have
you.
all this time to make babies because you are just traveling constantly. I mean,
Hey, you got to make time for what you want. You know what I'm saying? You got to make time.
that's right.
No doubt.
I love
But
it.
I can tell you this
Aw.
is, we have one of each. Daughters are definitely different.
Daughters are
But they
different.
have, for fathers, it's a special place in your heart, but they are definitely different than boys.
Oh, I mean, obviously
can't
you're
wait.
such a wonderful father, but I can already see that you are just going to be wrapped around her finger. It's going to happen. Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
Con-
No questions asked.
Congratulations. When is she due?
Due July 15th, but she's usually, 10 to 15 days early.
Oh my
So
gosh.
we're thinking like July 1st or July
Okay.
5th. It's my birthday, July 5th, so we'll see.
Right around the corner. Well, maybe you guys will share a birthday.
I know. Then it becomes her birthday. I know
Exactly.
how that
Yeah,
one
pretty
goes
much.
down.
I'm glad you already know that. Oh, I'm so excited for you guys. Congratulations. That just made me so
Thank you.
happy. So, oh, wow. I love it. So we're going to start off. We have a lot to talk about because you are so dynamic and you have done so much in really a short amount of time because you're not old. So we want to get into all the things that you're doing to inspire and unite people across the country. But we want to start with your first money memory. Do you have one?
Yeah, my first money memory, I guess it would be asking for quarters at the barbershop so I can get some bubble gum, I guess,
Love it.
You got the little gumball machines, and so you need money to be able to do that because you try to do, you're like, why is it not working?
Right.
And I'm thinking my first memory is asking, my pops for some quarters so I can get a gumball at a gumball machine. So that's probably the first memory of money that I've ever
I
had.
love that. That's so cute. I just got a visual of little Chris turning the silver dial, right? And it's like nothing's coming out, nothing's working.
Exactly.
I love it.
One of the reasons we love asking that question is because we believe that the way that you interact with money as an adult is very much influenced by how it was growing up, whether or not you didn't have enough money in the household, or if you guys had enough money, whether or not you were having conversations around financial literacy. However that situation occurred, 100% filters into how you are as an adult. And it's just always so interesting to hear people's memories and then how that equates to how they interact now when it comes to money.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, in a lot of households, you've probably heard this before, but, you ask your mom or your dad, hey, how much this costs? You go and buy it? Right. Why you need to know how much it costs? And so as a kid, in my household, I didn't really know how much anything costs. And I pride myself on telling my son how much stuff is now because I want him to know, hey, this costs a lot of money. It's $6,000 if we want to go on a Disney cruise. I want you to know how much money that is.
Yes.
So
We
I
have
have
one
those
plan.
conversations even though he's only
We
5.
have one planned for
March 2024. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So y'all know.
it's going to be it is going to be expensive. We haven't told our kids because it's going to be like a Christmas surprise for them. But we talk about money just all the time anyways, but our kids waste a ton of food and it's really infuriating. And so a lot of times, we say like, hey, these strawberries are expensive. You can't just take a bite and not finish it. Or, they have a plate full of food for dinner and they're just picking and playing. They do just enough to it to where like putting it in a Tupperware and putting it in the fridge feels disgusting, so then it goes in the trash. And I'm always like, gosh, we are wasting so much food. And so we have to talk to them about that often.
I hate wasting food, but I am not eating after my kids.
Oh,
Kids are
they're
gross.
so gross. Yeah.
As you know.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Oh man, it's funny. You try to, my 1 year, I got 1.5-year-old son, and anytime you let him have some of your drink, you might as well just give it to him
it's
because there's gonna
done.
be backwash in there.
Stuff
So you're like,
floating
hey, it's yours
around.
now,
You got
buddy.
like floaters.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
what
yours.
is that? What
You
just
got
came
it.
out of your mouth? Yeah, disgusting. I think
That's
I
funny.
think that's a great money memory, the gumball machine. Do you remember what your dad would say after you asked for money for the gumballs?
No, I do remember getting it. I had to be less than 5 years old. But I remember getting the money and for the first time realizing, oh, okay, well, that's why I wasn't working. I didn't have any money.
Yeah.
That's why the thing wasn't working. And so he definitely gave it to me. And I think barbershop memories are something that I really hold dear, near and dear to my heart because I remember those times where my dad was doing well and things were good with my family life, and so the barbershop was a good spot. We go to my Uncle Corey's. My Uncle Corey was a barber. We go over there. We'd have some barbecue wings right after we get the haircut, and it was a great Saturday morning. So I remember those memories pretty well.
I definitely believe that like barbershop, especially for black men, like that childhood memory definitely holds something because I remember telling my wife, I was like, I am so ready for when our son is old enough, to get his first haircut and we're ready to go ahead and take him to the barbershop because we wanted to build those type of memories with him.
That's good. No, that's cool. But we have a guy that comes over our house now. He's been my barber for the last like 10 years or so. And so he's been coming over to my house and, my son, my wife, our 1.5-year-old son hasn't gotten a cut. She's like, I want him to have long hair. I'm Brazilian. I want to see what his texture is going to be, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so I know you love that, right? I know you love it. And so she's been doing that with our 1-year-old, but she finally let him get a lineup. And so my 5-year-old, our barber comes to our house, cuts my hair, cuts my 5-year-old's hair. And we got the video of my son getting a lineup for the first time. And it's a great memory, man. Something I cherish it for sure.
I love it.
I also live as you could tell, I live my hair dreams to my child since my hairline has seen better days.
I love it.
A few weeks ago, Roman, at like 6:00 in the morning, Brandon was telling him to go do something, probably go get dressed or get ready for the day. And Roman straight up looks at Brandon and goes, "You're just a boy with no hair."
Yeah.
Like the ultimate diss. You're just a boy with no hair. And it was so funny. But I will say, so Roman also has started going to the barber shop. And the last time somebody new cut his hair, and Brandon didn't like the cut, and he said he was a younger guy, he just wasn't like personable. And Roman, who's 3.5, said, next time I want Dennis back. And Dennis was the guy who's previously been cutting his hair. And so even at 3.5, he was like, I don't like this guy cutting my hair.
You know it is. He chose his barber.
He chose his barber.
It's his barber now.
Dennis, shout out to Dennis. Dennis is the barber. And I mean, who knew that a 3-year-old could be so particular?
Well, in the barber shop, it's sacred who you go to. When you go to one guy, you have him, you stay with him, and you don't go to other people in the shop. That's a big no-no.
Yeah, big rule. Apparently.
No, for sure. And especially as you start to get a little older, because you're trying to hang on to certain things, and you go one time, they might mess you up. You're like, man, I ain't no coming back from this one, right? So,
Can't take the
we
risk.
try to hang on as long as we can. So I'm like, hey, man, you might have to go light over there because it don't grow in too much in that section,
Yeah.
And he knows because it's been 10 years, so that's pretty cool. I want to mention something that you guys talked about with the food. For me, I think it's been like 6 months since we've been doing this, but my family, we sponsor 10 kids in Guatemala. It's called Food for the Hungry. It's a nonprofit. And at first I was doing it because I was at church and, I felt like I was called to do it. Something was telling me I need to support these kids. But then, now with my 5-year-old son who's super picky and eats half of everything, it really puts things into perspective for him. Hey, we sponsor these kids, at, I think it's $48 a month or something like that per kid. And it feeds them for the whole month. It's supposed to feed them for the whole month. And it's like, man, you're throwing away this. Like, we're paying for kids to have food because they're really struggling where they live and where their school is at. So I think that's an easy way to kind of get it in their heads. Like, hey, teach them that they're privileged and blessed to be able to throw away food,
Right. Absolutely. We always say that as soon as we keep wanting to take them to the food bank, because Brandon and I volunteer at the food bank, but they don't allow kids under 5. So I guess we could take Aston now.
Yeah, she just turned 5.
But just to help them, realize, serving and giving back is so important, so that we're giving back and helping, but it's also so good for our soul. But then also realizing, not everybody has things in abundance the way you do. And so those are definitely lessons that we want to instill. So I've made a note, Food for the Hungry. We will link it in the show notes. We will look into it as well. So thank you for sharing that. We want to get into the work that you're doing, because you just talked about church and, serving and giving back. And we know that that's so much of who you are and what you do day to day. So we want to understand, for our listeners who don't know you, the background of why you do what you do, and what that message of hope and unity and love really is that you share all over the country now. So can you walk us through that?
Yeah. So, growing up, I didn't have a dream of being a professional speaker or an author or anything like that. Like most young kids that had parents that are athletes, my goal was to play professional sports. And so I, played all the sports growing up. But my freshman year of college, where I was playing baseball, there was a really horrific event that happened. And at the time, this was like one of its kind. Unfortunately, terrible things have happened since then. And so unfortunately, we've seen it happen over and over again. But on June 17, 2015, I lost my mom in a racially motivated mass shooting where a young man named Dylan Roof, who conspired a plan to murder people in a church in hopes that he would start a race war in our country. And that's what he did. He didn't start the race war, but he took 9 lives. And my mom, unfortunately, was a victim in that shooting, in that mass shooting. And so I lost my hero that day. And so for the last 7.5 years of my life, I've devoted my life to do the exact opposite of what my mother's killer wanted to do. He wanted to divide us. And now I promised my mom and my church family I would try to unite people, no matter where they're from, what they look like, what their first language is, what their faith is, right? I'm trying to let us live in harmony. We don't always have to agree, but we can agree to disagree respectfully. And I do that in schools. I do that with corporations, do that with sports teams, and I do that through literature. So that's what I do now, and it's all to make my mom proud. I have this hashtag. It says, #can't let moms down, which means every single day of my life, I live my life in a way that people will say, man, this young man is raised the right way. And when they say that, that's a huge compliment from my parents. So that's what I'm trying to do. And the story happened. And, now I'm just trying to do some good with it.
How did that happen? Because I'm just going to be honest. You turned something so tragic into something so beautiful. And you were really young when this happened.
Because I remember when the event happened because, Jess and I both graduated from the College of Charleston. And so we had a tie to Charleston. I'd walk past that church hundreds of times. And I remember seeing you in the news and thinking, I can't believe that someone that young is that poised and has such a positive message during what I could only think of as like one of the worst things that could ever happen to, if it was to happen to myself, that could happen to me. And I was thinking, I can't believe that he is able to do all this, while dealing with this tragedy.
Right.
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, I think there's some things that are hard to describe in worldly terms. And, I've never heard like the voice of God. Some people are like, hey, God told me to tell you this. I never heard God speak in my ear before personally, right? But I do think there's certain instances where I can't describe how I was given strength. I can't describe how I was able to forgive my mother's killer without saying that something out of this world put that on my heart. And I know that for a fact is what happened in that instance, because some people say, hey, this is my gift. My gift may be to play sports, or my gift may be I'm a great artist, or, my gift I feel was to go through immense pain and still be able to see the good in the world. My gift is getting through that pain and now trying to help other people get through it. So, and I know that gift was given to me. It's something that I feel like I was born with. And I had no idea that's what my true gift was in my life. I thought it was playing baseball, robbing home runs and trying to hit them. I thought that's what my gift was. But after I went through that tragedy and I forgave my mother's killer, then I realized the power of forgiveness after it was placed on my heart. Then I realized what we can do with our pain. Most people, we don't share our pain. We keep it deep down. We don't talk about it. Especially most men that look like you and I, right? We don't talk about it. We keep it suppressed and we just live our lives in hopes that it'll go away. Or we have vices that we do or we use the hope that will numb the pain. And for me, I finally opened up. I started to cry in front of, family members, which was new for me because everybody said I was so strong. And I started to study, how do people get through their pain? How did I get through it? And in doing that, that's how I can help other people. And I speak from a place of experience. Most times when you meet somebody or, a person that's a thought leader for lack of better words, it's like, well, how do you become an influencer or a thought leader? It's usually, hey, they're super smart. So they got 7 different degrees. They're Dr. such and such. They went to all these universities, or they're super famous. And so because they're so famous, you want to follow what they say, or they've been through it. And after they've been through it, it's like, hey, I can help you get through it because I've been where you're at. And I'm the latter. I've been where people are. And I share things that I wish I would have known when I was faced with this immense tragedy.
I just remember too, because, like Brandon said, we lived in Charleston and we had walked by that church 100 times. And, I saw something the other day. I'm kind of pivoting. I saw something the other day that was basically like a conversation between two people. And one person said, did you see about the shooting in Texas? And the other person responded, which one? Right. And that's kind of the state of where we are. It's like every day there's a shooting, right? And there's so much talk around proper gun laws and gun safety and all of that. But when the shooting at the church happened in 2015, it really did feel out of the ordinary. It felt, oh my gosh, how did this happen, right? How did this person get their hands on this weapon? And so I'm wondering, out of all of that, again, you were young and you were, like Brandon said, so poised, and it seemed like you just went into action, that you were like, I've got to do something. I've got to write books. I've got to channel this into something positive. I know some people are like, oh, my overnight success took 10 years, right? Because people don't see the behind the scenes. But how long between you grieving or trying to grieve, figuring out how to grieve and becoming vulnerable to when you were able to actually have these conversations without breaking down? And I mean, you talk to thousands of people every year. Where or when did that turning point happen for you?
Yeah, I would say, initially I made a mistake of pretending like I wasn't destroyed by it. And the reason why I say pretending is because after I, said love is stronger than hate, then the very next day I had all these social media followers. I was on the CNN, I was on the Today Show, I was on, throwing the first pitch for the Yankees. Tom Brady's calling me to come up to the hangout with the Patriots. Cam Newton, the quarterback's coming to my house. So all these different things are happening, and I didn't give myself any time. And, right after all that, the first initial wave kind of slowed down. I did an ESPN documentary called Love is Stronger Than Hate on ESPN about me and my mom. And so there's a new wave, right? And I never gave myself time to fully grieve. I think when you go through true tragedy, I don't believe you move on. You can work through it. And, I will never have my mom's, here to see my kids. So I can never move on from that. But I do have ways that I work through it now. And so that's kind of what I learned. I think there was probably a year period after we did a bunch of this media stuff, after we did the Today Show, after everybody reached out, after the documentary, that I finally started to say, hey, what can I do with the pain that I have? Can I start crying now? Can I, show emotion? And in doing so, I started to just research, hey, looking up different speakers that were motivational speakers on YouTube and, them helping me out, getting through their tough times. I would hear like, hey, you're already in pain, like get a reward from it, from Dr. Eric Thomas. I'd hear one of my favorite speakers ever, a guy named Inky Johnson. I heard him on a YouTube video, and I said to my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, and to my teammates, like, hey, if I can make somebody feel like how this guy just made me feel, I want to do that with my life. And of course, I was still playing baseball, but that's when it initially clicked about a year after I lost my mom, that maybe I can share my pain to help other people get through it.
So, okay. I think it's really interesting that you're talking about not grieving. It sounds like you didn't really have time, not that you didn't want to, but you're getting bombarded with all these opportunities and come speak here, come speak there.
You also don't know how to.
Well, yeah, you have to really learn how to grieve.
I think,
truly.
Dealing with that mental health aspect is just something that's now really being talked about. And as he said before, especially within the Black community, especially as black men,
yeah.
It was always, keep it inside, button up, you'll be all right. And so he had to have that, it was his own steps to even figure out how to do it.
Right. I'm sure that's changed.
Yeah, and I think...
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, for me, initially, I used to think that my sport, obviously, my faith was growing for the first time, because at first I was just, hey, going to church because I didn't have any choice. You know what I'm saying? My mom was like, boy, you better get in the car. We going to church. And for the first time, I started to read the Bible by myself. I started to pray by myself for the first time. And it was therapeutic. It was therapeutic to cry during my prayers. It was therapeutic to learn that, Jesus wept. And I'm like, okay, so I'm not by myself and feeling this pain. Like if our God, if our creator, like has felt pain like this before in the human form, then I'm not the only person. I'm not by myself, even though I feel like I'm by myself, And I also believe, man, when we locked arms after that. Unfortunately, today what happens is like something terrible happens and we're like, well, I wonder what happened beforehand, or what provoked this. I wonder if this is really super. And it's like, no, when wrong is wrong, you just lock arms and you say wrong is wrong. You shouldn't have to say, well, I wonder what happened beforehand. I wonder what might have caused. No, it's just wrong. And we know it is. Let's try to stop it from happening and not let this hate win. And that was big for me. But I mean, today, my grieving looks like, I cry, but more so now than anything, when I think about my mom, it's like a memory. It makes me smile. And it took time for that to, instead of being sad when that happens, it's like, hey, my mom would have thought this was hilarious. She would have hated this, and I smile about it. And so that's different ways that I kind of honor her legacy. Both of my parents have passed away, so honor their legacy over the last, 7-8 years.
So, kind of stemming back, since, our, one of the main focus of our podcast is the financial literacy aspect. And, unfortunately, what often happens with a tragedy is that the individual is not simply just dealing with the loss of a loved one. Sometimes, or too often, you end up having some financial issues that come with that grievance. So if you don't mind me asking, what was the financial situation after your mother passed?
Yeah, man, I'm super open when it comes to money. And I think sometimes people who aren't open when it comes to money is either they don't give. And so they're like, if I tell people how much I have or how much I make, then it's like, I don't give anything. So I feel weird about that. Whereas for me, I'm super open because I know how much me and my family give every year. And so when I first lost my mom, people were donating money to the church, but it wasn't to my family. And so it was a weird kind of time where, donations were coming in, GoFundMes were happening, but they were kind of for the church or for like families, not just my family specifically. Mm-hmm. And anytime that happens, it kind of it's like a gray area of like, well, how do we know what to earmark for the Singleton family or for this family? And so that was definitely happening initially. My mom had life insurance to where we each got 40,000 when we turned 18, 40,000 when we turned 21, 40,000 when we turned 25. And so I think the life insurance actually doubled. Instead of it being 20, it was 40 because it was like a sudden death. Like nobody knew this was happening. I don't know what kind of plan she even had, but that's what happened. Mm-hmm. And so, I basically had $40,000 when I was 18. What I wish I would have done, if I can go back in time, we lost my mother's house due to foreclosure. And, I had a million different people telling me a million different things about, what I should do, what I shouldn't do, what I'm doing, living, in college and what I was going to do next. And so we actually owed $90,000 on our home, and it was worth about 160 at the time, right? I think it was 160, 165. And an investor bought it for 90,000, didn't have to touch anything, and he was able to, I believe he sold it or refinanced it or whatever he did for that 160 number. And I remember thinking, like, at the time I didn't know, so it was like, whatever, it's okay. I'm living in an apartment in college, trying to get drafted. But looking back, man, I know for a fact I should have never lost that home for us. I could have asked a bunch of people to help me keep it. I could have made a way to, make that happen. Mm-hmm. And the guy that was an investor, he's a nice guy. He said, well, hey, Chris, the bank has this. I'm buying it from the bank. I know that there's some washers and dryers in here. Do you guys want these? Like, I want to make sure everything that you have, valuable stuff from this home, you're going to take. So we took the washer and dryer. We just didn't know. And after that happened, man, I remember reading everything I could about finance. I read real estate books. And, fast forward some years, me and my family, we own 20 homes now. And so, like, that came from me not knowing anything about real estate and then literally diving head first into everything I could when it comes to having a house and having rental properties and investments. But that's kind of initially what happened. And, when something this drastic happens, especially when you kind of become, for lack of better words, a little famous, there's a lot of donations coming in. And I remember at one point, there was an organization that wrote our family a check for like a little over $100,000. And we got to split the check each way for me, my little brother, and my little sister. And so I remember initially not being super worried because when I was 19 years old, I thought that having $70,000 or $80,000 in your bank account, I thought it was like, hey, there's nothing to ever worry about. I didn't realize that's not a lot of money, I thought, hey, things are going to be good. I didn't, what I'm saying? I thought we'll be fine. And, fast forward 2 years and I got drafted by the Cubs and I got my signing bonus, which was $100,000. And I took my mom's life insurance, signing bonus, and, I rented a house for my brother and sister to come back and live with us. And so my family was rejoined in about a year and a half later after my mom was killed.
So again, you took a situation where, man, now looking back, you should have been able to keep your family home, no questions asked. But you pivot and you take that and you're like, now I own 20 homes. And I know that portfolio is growing and that, real estate is big for you. Have you been able to purchase back your family home, or is that something that you want to do just to be able to say you've done? Or are you done with that?
Yeah, I've thought about that. And, that house is probably worth 370 grand or something now, right? You know how crazy stuff is, right? And so I've thought about it. It'd be more for sentimental value than like as an investment because the numbers probably wouldn't work on that one as a rental. But, my wife has talked about buying her childhood home, and I'd probably buy that one before. We have our home that we grew up in when we first moved to Charleston that we still own. And my sister and I kind of keep that one. And it's not rented out. We got a lot of work needs to be done with it. But that'd probably be the first project we do if we kind of keep something for sentimental value.
So you mentioned your sister. Is your sister, you guys in the real estate investing together?
Yeah, so my sister, she just graduated from college last year, and she's trying to dabble in it a little bit. 2 years ago, no, last year, we were able to settle a case with the government, and so our family got a little over $1 million for me, my brother, and my sister each. And so because we got that money, I think that the large sum for all the family members was just under $100 million. And when you break that down from like survivors, families that had a victim that passed away, or excuse me, that were taken away, for our families, a little bit over $1 million each for us. And so I fully invested that in real estate, buying an 8-unit building. My salary, my income that I make is, significant. So I didn't really want to keep a bunch in the bank or to invest a lot in stocks, because I do that annually every year. So I just bought a building with mine, and my sister bought a single family property. She rents that out right now. She bought herself a personal home, and so she does a little bit in real estate, but not to the extent that I do. She's got a lot of her money with our financial advisor and very safe stuff. It's a small return every year, but it's very, very safe. And I always tell her, hey, this is the money that, was given to us to make sure we don't struggle severely after we lost our moms in such a terrible way. So let's treat it as such. And she's done a great job with that after learning from me with some of the mistakes she made before, So she's got me to look at. And my brother has been on it. My little brother, he's phenomenal. He loves finance. He loves learning about money. And in tragedy, man, a lot of people take what they're given and they just blow it.
Yeah.
And I say I think it's my obligation and my duty to make sure that doesn't happen. And I know at the end of the day, they're their own people. But the best thing I can do is lead by example. And I've definitely done that.
At what point did you get help, right? You're clearly a DIYer. You get in the weeds. You do your research. You obviously want to learn about all the topics. But when did you say, okay, I'm getting a $40,000 check. I'm getting a $30,000 check. I need help. I want to do this the right way. When did you start getting professional help for your finances?
Yeah, great question. So there was a guy who wrote us a check for like maybe 50 grand, and he had a big event, and he said, hey, Chris, before I hand you this check for your family, I want you to meet with my financial advisor. And I went downtown and I met with this guy, and at the time their assets under management was probably just under 800 million or something like that, his team. And I met with him, and he was phenomenal. Now I'm a real estate guy, but because after I studied everything real estate. I'm listening to every podcast. I'm watching every YouTube video. And this guy wasn't that way, but he was very conservative and he was super smart and successful. So I met with him, and that's when I finally started to get help. That's probably 2 years after my mom was killed that I started to have a professional financial advisor. And ever since, at the end of the day, I study finance because I like doing it. Most people don't like studying it, or it's like daunting, or it's kind of
intimidating,
scary to them.
Yep.
Yeah. But for me, I actually like it. So I always want to know what's going on. And even though I had a financial advisor, I still knew where all of my money was.
As you should.
As you should.
Yes.
As a financial advisor, I always want to make sure that my clients that I am educating them along the way, whatever, strategies we're implementing or whatever, products may be used. I want to make sure that they have a very good understanding of what's occurring, because I don't ever want them to be in the dark of what's going on with their money,
Yeah. But some people are like, oh, my financial advisor takes care of it. I don't know what's happening. I don't know where it is. And it's like,
that's how you get taken.
Right. That's terrible.
For sure. And that's something I've always been fearful of. And so trust is super important. If you can't trust your financial advisor, then that shouldn't be your financial advisor, right?
I agree.
That's been super important for me. Yeah. That's been super important. But also knowing finances at more than just the surface level has been important for me in my life as well. So those things have kind of kept me straight. I keep my checks and balances. My financial advisor and my accountant are always, talking to another. Plus, I love to do stuff myself, and so I'm always asking a million questions too.
I love that you
Yeah.
pointed out the your accountant and your financial advisor having conversations and working together, because too often I see that if an individual does have a financial advisor and an accountant, they're not having conversations. And I was like, all those individuals that are touching your, even like in the real estate aspect, you have a real estate agent that you're specifically working with, they need to be in the conversation as well. And I'm always trying to tell people, like, they're all working towards the same common goal at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And I'll give you one example of how important that is. This past year, did really well financially from speaking to, companies, different organizations, sports teams. And so I had a really, really high tax bill, over six figures for my tax bill. And because we bought this 8-unit building, we were able to do a cost segregation study on it. And we saved about $80,000 in money that we had to pay. Now we still had to pay, I think we still paid like 70 or 75, but we saved 80 grand, And so at the end of the day, if I didn't have everybody working together, there's no way I would have learned about bonus depreciation and cost segregation on this 8-unit building that we bought, unless everybody's a team and we're working together. And I know that I should bring it up to my accountant.
Yes.
Because certain things, it's like, hey, I want to make sure you know about this and that we actually do qualify, because my wife is a full-time real estate professional. So there's certain things that you have to make sure you're learning, you're asking questions about to make sure it will work for you, or maybe it doesn't work for you, but you want to at least bring certain things to the forefront.
I would say,
great.
especially once you're making a certain income, and especially if you have multiple sources of income, having a great CPA, is it going to cost you something? 100%, but they're going to, save you so much money that it's going to pay for their fee 10 times over.
Absolutely. And it's not even close. It might be 20 times over. So it's important.
Yeah. Well, this is a great segue, Chris, because obviously you went from being a professional athlete to being a full-time entrepreneur and speaker and writer. Walk us through that transition. When did you realize, okay, I don't need to be on the field anymore? What did that look like, and why? And what was the transition into full-time entrepreneurship like for you?
Yeah, well, when I was playing baseball, I was in the minor leagues and I wasn't making any money first and foremost, right? So they gave you get a signing bonus. You get let's say for my signing bonus, they gave me $100,000. The Cubs gave me $100,000, and they 35,000 of that is taxed, and so I got 65 grand. And so you're supposed to live off your signing bonus for your minor league contract, which could be 4-6 years. And by year, I told my wife 4 years is like my plan. If I don't get there in 4 years, I'm gonna stop playing. And so I played 2 years and I got released in spring training. Now, when you get released, you can go try to play for another team. You can go play for an independent team. But then again, you're still in the minor leagues. And by this time, my wife is at home with my son, with my brother, with my sister, who we're taking care of. And I wasn't making any money. I said, you know what? I was already speaking in the off season, providing for our family. I said, hey, I think I'm supposed to do this thing full time. I'm going to go ahead and retire from baseball. And I did. And I used to think when I first started speaking, I was like, man, once I just tell everybody I'm speaking, it's going to be good to go. Like my goal used to be, if I can make $1,500 a week, man, I would have a great life from speaking. That used to be my goal. And I sent all these emails out. Hey, Chris Singleton would love to speak to your school. And I didn't realize if they bring me to speak to their school, that's 800 to 1,000 kids, and they never even heard my message before. They got to really trust me to put me in front of 800 of their kids, and they don't know what the heck I'm going to say, right? And so I started to try to build relationships more, and people that I know and that trust me, and got opportunities, some here, some there. And I studied the craft of speaking so much that I knew if I got one opportunity, it was going to lead to more. And I was exactly right. And so for the last 7 years, it's just grown exponentially from, wanting to make $1,500 a week to now, making at least $15,000 a week from speaking. And it's just kept growing every single year. And I say, hey, every opportunity I get, I want to steward it well. And I've been blessed that now I get 30 to 45 requests a month. And, we pick and choose which ones I can and can't do. But I know every opportunity I get, I better knock it out of the park, because I'm making my mom proud by doing so. I'm keeping my church family's legacy alive by doing so. And I'm helping out any person that's going through pain or needs a message of unity that I present, that's in that audience.
So fun fact, Chris and I worked together on my keynote this was during the pandemic, I'm pretty sure.
So.
And you and I would be up on Zoom late night, crafting my message, crafting my keynote. It was so inspiring, and I loved just working with you and learning from you and absorbing. Brandon and I are such big, we will pay for the help, right? Like, we are not experts in everything. So if
most
I
things.
can, most things. So if I can pay to spend time with somebody who's doing something that I'm interested in and doing it well, that's money well spent. And the time, that we spent together and the money that I paid you, which, truthfully was not enough for the value that you offered. I'm sure your pricing has gone up since then. It was such a great time, right? To just be sitting on Zoom with you, crafting my message, learning from you. And the reason I'm saying that is because, so this must have been 3 years ago at this point. I remember you saying, because you were very transparent with your numbers, that your goal was to make $10,000 a month, right? If I can make $10,000 a month, my family will be good. Then I'm going to make my mom proud. I can take care of my responsibilities. So that to hear you say from that moment, $10,000 a month to now $15,000 a week, that's incredible. And because your business and your opportunities are coming from referrals, I think it's just such a testament to who you are and the fact that people are just drawn to you, that people will want to advocate for you. They want to put your name into those rooms where you're not currently there, right? Like they're really rooting for you and wanting you to have those opportunities. So I want to say that I'm really proud of the work that you're doing and how you've built your business. And I think a referral-based business, and that's what Brandon's in, right? It's hard because you have to show up authentically and well every single time. Like you could be getting lazy. You could be like, oh, I've got 30 to 40 requests a month for speaking, and now I'm picking and choosing. Everybody's coming to me. My inbox is flooding. I can just do whatever. But the fact that you're like, no, I've got to show up every single time I step on stage or step in front of a podium or hold a mic in my hand and do a great job, I think is just shows your integrity and just the kind of man that you are. So I think it's just worth calling out that every single time you speak, you do it as if it's the first time, which is so wonderful.
Yeah. And you gotta, somebody needs to hear that message. And not only that, but every opportunity you get will lead to more if you do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I realized that. And so, I think 2018 was my first year finally, doing six figures as a speaker. 2019, like I told you, my goal was to make $10,000 a month. And as things progress, your goals will progress. And so 2020, I released my first book, and I had no idea, I self-published my book. So I didn't really know a whole lot about most stuff, but I self-published it, and I got so blessed that people everywhere were supporting it. And, finally was able to do multiple six figures. And as things kept growing, I realized I used to always say, man, people would be, oh, Chris, man, you need to listen to this guy. This guy makes good money. And I'd be like, I don't know what the heck good money is, because
at one point you thought it was $70,000 for the year.
You know what I'm saying? Like, man, I used to think people that had the mansions were making like,
right,
$100,000 a year. I'm like, they got to have way more than that, I didn't know. But I would be like, I don't know what good money is. And so, I started meeting people that were making, $50,000 a month and $100,000 a month. And, now I'm like, wow, I didn't know what that meant. And so it's all subjective. For me, my goal, I have the 5 things that I want to accomplish. And I'm grateful over the last 12 years, I can finally say I accomplished this one. But the first one is I wanted to make $1 million in a year. And so for the last 12 months, from May to May, I've made $1 million in a year. I talked to my wife about it. That's my first thing. The second thing is I want my wife to love me, my kids to love me, right? I don't want to lose that one, chasing that first one. Yeah. The third thing is I want to make sure I'm a man of faith. I don't want to lose my faith. That's who I am. That's what I'm rooted in. The next thing is I want to be a giver. I don't want to be stingy. Like I feel comfortable sharing how much I make because I know how much we give, and people know as well. And the last thing, I want to be, physically fit. That's my thing. I want to be fit and live that lifestyle and be able to chase my kids around and jump on the trampoline and dive off the thing into our pool, that kind of stuff. And so those are my 5 things that I cherish and I was shooting for. And in my industry, if you want to make $1 million, you got to be on the road. And at a certain point, I realized, okay, for me in my life, there's no quality of life change from, making 600 to making $1 million. There's no quality of life change at all. But in my mind, I was like, I gotta make, because I never made $1 million before. And so I was like, I gotta make the $1 million. And I'm just so grateful that I didn't spend my whole life chasing $1 million. And now I realize the $1 million ain't no different than $500,000 when you live in the way that I do. Now, maybe if I lived in like Beverly Hills or, lived in like, San Francisco, then $1 million might not be as much as, it is for me where I live in the house that we have and the way that we live our lifestyle. But I'm so grateful that I learned this at a young age, to where is making an extra $300,000 or $200,000, is that more valuable than spending an extra 20 days home or 35 days home? Or is like coaching my son's travel baseball team one day, in my mind, that's worth an extra $100,000. Because I could probably make an extra $100,000 by not being at all those practices, not being at all those games. But I've already learned there's no quality of life change from $100,000 after you're at a certain point.
I love,
you know what I'm saying?
I love that you're saying that, because
Yes,
I'm
so
really
great.
big on, people defining what it is and how they want to live their life. So, when we're sitting down talking about goals, I don't want to hear like monetary goals, to be honest with you. I want to hear what you want your life to look like. Like you said, I want to be able to be at home and coach my son's baseball games. I want to have, be able to take these vacations. Like, I don't want to hear, I want to make granted, some people have these goals. Like you said, I want to make $1 million a year. But what is $1 million a year going to do to you? How is it going to afford you to live the life that you want to live? Because what if we can live that same life, as you said, at less money? Or what if you make that money and it doesn't afford you the life because it occupies too much time? So that's why I love that you really went deep into, the goals that you had, but then also realizing and having to redefine those goals to really fit within the life that you actually want to live.
But I think having those grounding back to those 5 pillars for you, I think is pivotal, right? Because you could have, again, as a young person, getting a $50,000 check and be like, I'm going to go buy a car, or I'm going to, you could have just thrown it away, but you seem to have always had this real sense of maturity and this grounding that I think is lacking for a lot of people. And now that you can comfortably say, hey, I've made $1 million, I don't necessarily need to make $1 million again next year, because what's important to me doesn't require $1 million, right? I think it's just so mature and so wise.
Because you're what, 25?
26. I'll be 27 in a month, so almost 27.
Okay. All this knowledge at almost 27 years. I mean, it's the fact that you can live, the next 60 years with this mindset of, hey, I'm working, I'm doing what I love, I'm grateful, I can give back, I have what I need for my family, what we want to do, the house we want to live in. I just think it's so mature to not constantly be chasing a dollar,
Yeah, I think another important thing is, though, the reason why I'm kind of built this way is because I know that it's on me. At the end of the day, I don't have my parents here. I don't have grandparents. And so, like, if anything happens for my family, it's like, okay, Chris, what do we do? How are we going to be able to do this? Like, can we do this? And so I knew that ever since I've been 19 years old. And so my wife, I even had to have conversations with my wife, like, hey, like right now, we may not be able to have all the Amazon boxes that you want at the house, 5 years ago, when things are a little different. My thing was I really wanted to have 10 homes paid off by 40. Before I started really, making the money that I'm making now, that was like my thing. I want to have 10 homes paid off by 40 because my parents only lived till 45 and 46. So I started saying, okay, if my parents didn't see 50, my parents never saw 50. My mom was killed at 45 and my dad was actually 47. when he passed away. So I'm like, if they didn't see 50, I want to make sure that if I'm lucky enough to see 50, then I'll be in the clear. You know what I'm saying? I'll be able to go to do what I want. I'll be able to hang out with my wife. We'll be able to have a good time. And I thought about these things because people passed away so young. So that's why I want to set my life up to where, just in case, Lord willing, I, live till I'm 80 something and, pass away in my sleep. But just in case, I want to be able to love the life that I have when I'm 40 years old or 45 years young. So that's kind of the thought process that went behind me thinking of this so young. Plus, I always thought about being a speaker, and I don't have to think about it this way, but I did. Because so many crazy things happen in this world, I used to always think, man, I hope people care about the message that I have in 3 years. I don't know if they will. And so I've always been like, hey, I don't want to just blow this on buying, a Rolls Royce and a G-Wagon for me and my wife. It's like, no, we can have nice cars or whatever, but I want to make sure that the house that we buy pays for our car note. So if my car note is $1,150, which it is right now, I'm driving a Range Rover, it's like I have a property that's paid off that pays me over $1,150 to be able to pay for that note every single month and not stress about it. And so my thing was always, okay, if I have my 10 paid off homes, I'll make at least $10,000 net cash flow a month for my real estate. And at the time, this isn't anymore, but at $10,000 net cash flow a month would have paid for my life comfortably. Now it's way more than that,
It's about to get a little bit more expensive with the additional one.
Yeah, with extra, human in the house.
You start buying, maybe we should have, you don't need none of this stuff, but you start buying extra stuff, and it's like, kids start going to private school, stuff that wasn't happening before. So all that stuff starts adding up. But that was always my thought process.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I remember, like I said, like when the tragedy happened, you were a freshman in college, and like I'm 40 now, so I was in my early 30s when that happened. I just remember seeing you, on all the different outlets, and I was just like, it's obviously one of the worst things that could happen to you, but it seems like you were built for that type of presence, because like you had a presence, and it was very obvious early on, and it's obviously why like a lot of the news outlets were coming to you to have these conversations, because seemed as though it was something that was in you. This was just you. This was who you are. The presence you have was meant to come out in a manner where you are able to do these, be a speaker of that sort and everything like that. It was just obvious very early on as someone that's older and, had, like I said, a few years older than you. And, I just remember I'm rambling now, but I just remember thinking, I'm just like, he is so, wise beyond his years. At such a young age. It was heartwarming, sad, everything at the same time, but it was just amazing to watch, see from there and see how you took that into where you're at now. It's just, as a man, it's just amazing to watch, what you've done with all that.
Side note, Brandon is not
I appreciate
a
that.
Speaker.
Yeah, I'm not a good
unless he goes
speaker.
through your training program, because goodness gracious.
We always talk about having a TED Talk.
No,
I'm like, she's going to have a TED Talk. I'm not a TED Talk person.
Ooh, he means well. His heart is always in the right place. Okay, I want to be respectful of your very precious time, Chris. We have 2 more things, and I think this portion is really good for the conversation about the relationship, right? You and your wife, you're on the road a lot. Now she's going to be at home with 3 kids. What was the conversation like with her about, hey, I'm going to be on the road. I'm going to be traveling. This is going to be my new life. This is going to be my career. Did she oppose in any way? Was she always, behind you? Obviously, that's a lot of sacrifice on her part, because I know what it's like to be at home with a kid, right? Like, let alone 2. They would drive me crazy. So it is a sacrifice for the family for you to live out your dream. Right. So can you talk to us about what those conversations were like, and maybe how they've evolved over time now that your business has grown so much?
Yeah, I think initially it's hard when you have money coming in and it's like you don't want to spend it on stuff that you want. You're just trying to like save it for stuff that is beneficial for us in the future. And when then there's no benefit for you immediately, it's really hard for somebody to buy into that. And so we had those conversations, those heated conversations initially, right? But the grateful thing is, like, as things have grown, my wife, she, number one, she sees how impactful this message is. If I was full of you know what, there's no way she would let me do what I
Yeah.
do, right? And she knows that I'm making a difference. She sees the messages from kids. She sees the stuff that the lives that are being impacted, which is important. And now my son sees that too, which is really cool. But also, at a certain point, I read this book called Wealth Can't Wait, and it talked about how we don't complain about the $5 coffee that our wife is spending or we're spending money on. It's like, well, how do I make an extra $50 today? And so for me, instead of thinking, hey, well, should I be upset that my wife is spending, $800 a month on random stuff or whatever? No, I shouldn't be upset. For me, it's like, hey, how do I make sure that's not even a drop in the bucket when it comes to, the money that we're investing, the money that we're saving, the money that we have coming in. And I kind of flipped my mindset on that. Also, my wife's from Brazil and she grew up, didn't have a lot. So it's not like she's going out buying a new Chanel and Prada purse every single day, right? So we'd have that another discussion then. But we know what we want to spend money on. We know what we care about. And so we're on the same page. But it grew, man. It grew because initially when you have money, it's like, hey, why don't I just buy the nicest thing that I can right now? And then it's like, it's gone then. But instead, it's like, how do we invest together, have the same goals, right? Because if you're aligned, then it's like, okay, well, we're doing this together. And then eventually, boom, we can have that and this and that one. And we wouldn't have to worry about if we can afford it or not. And I think we're finally at that space now where we're building a pool in our house. The pool is like almost $140,000 in total for all this different stuff.
Yeah.
If you would have told me I'm gonna spend 140 grand on a pool 5 years ago, I said, boy, you out of your mind. I'd never do that, right?
Yeah.
So as things have grown, I've just learned so much, invested, my income so that we live our lifestyle mainly from our passive income, which is almost 13 grand a month now. And we do these things so it's like, hey, we can't afford this or we can't afford that. But it's grown over time. It's definitely grown. My wife handles all of our real estate too. So she manages all of our stuff. And I know for a fact she is a million times better than that. As far as like the accounting stuff, she's really good at. But also having contractors, talking to tenants, like that stuff, she's got a great headspace for. So she's been crushing it on that side, and I buy them, and after I buy them, she gets them fixed up, and she gets people in them, and we treat them great, so they treat us great.
Talk to us about your two children's books, and you have a new announcement. You have written a book for adults, so we want our listeners to know about the two children's books and what those are about. We will definitely link those in the show notes as well, where you want us to buy them. And then tell us about your latest book that's coming out.
Yeah, so well now I've actually got 3 children's books. So I've got my first one, Different, a story about loving your neighbor. I got my second one called Your Life Matters. And then my third children's book is called Baseball Around the World. And the announcement that I have is that June 17th. So if this is releasing on today, then today I'm releasing my first adult book. And it's called Stories Behind Stances. And this is all about my mission of being united. And the context of the book is that behind every single person's stance that they take is a story about why they take it. And in a world where we feel so divisive and, hey, I don't know how this person could ever think this way, I think for the first time we'll have a book that shares the story behind that person's belief. And hopefully there'll be some empathy there. Don't have to change what you believe. Don't have to change who you are. But for the first time, maybe you hear the other side of somebody's story and you say, you know what? Even though I don't think that way, I understand why they do. And this book is releasing, and I'm super excited about it. It's a lot of work. It's not like a children's book by any means. Thousands and thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of words. But I'm excited, and I'm hopeful that people will receive it well.
So it sounds incredible. Is it stories from other people about all of these divisive topics? Like, what can we expect when we buy the book?
For sure. So I'll give you two topics off the rip. One of the topics is gun control, and so I take a person's story that was deeply impacted by gun violence, and I won't tell you who the person is, but if you're listening to them, it's got a voice that sounds like mine, right? And then you have somebody else that who grew up with guns, and it makes them feel safe because they feel protected. They don't want their wife to leave the house without having the gun in their car. It just makes them feel safe. And we talk about both of the stories behind their different stances, how one person will probably never own a gun in their home and feels nervous around them, and the other person wants their wife and their family to have the gun at all times and make sure that people are, and we give both perspectives about how can they not view this thing the same, but still respect each other. One of the topics. Another one that is super important and is super impactful in our time right now is immigration. And we talk about both sides of that, how, maybe one person, I'm giving away way too much. But let's just say,
go buy the book. We will link it.
On both sides, you're going to be like, man, I never thought about that from this way. And then the other one's like, man, I never even thought about that person like this. And so you'll hear it both sides of the story. And hopefully there'll be more empathy, man, for people that think different than we do.
Oh, I love that.
We will definitely be buying that book. Unfortunately, nowadays, people don't listen to understand. They listen to simply wait till the person's done talking to give their perspective. So I love the idea of the book because, we try to have these conversations, especially, since you had brought up the, gun laws. I have someone that I talk to that we're, we have similar ground, but we're kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum as well. But, we have good conversations that, we might just respectfully disagree on certain things, but we hear each other out and we do it in as you said, a respectful manner.
Yeah. And it's somebody, he works for Smith & Wesson.
Yes.
Yeah. So he's in the gun industry, has guns, goes and shoots guns all the time. But he, like Brandon said, him and Brandon have had lots of conversations, and he's actually been able to shed light on some of the misconceptions around some of the gun laws and the buyback programs. And it's important to have these conversations. It doesn't mean that you have to walk away with a changed mindset or totally changing your stance, but understanding the other side and having maybe an ounce more of empathy for that scenario, or just learning, right? It's all about learning and growth and understanding. That really, I think, is where the unity comes from. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
I'm going to need that to be an Audible so that we can hear you reading the book too. So if that's not on your to-do list, go ahead and add that. Chris, I want to end on a happy note because I feel like we talked about so much. We talked about the financial aspect, which was so important. But we also really want to honor your mother and the anniversary that's coming up. And I think anybody that knows you knows how proud she would be of you. But I remember one night when you were coaching me that we talked about her tattoo. And I just remember laughing so hard. I think I'm like tearing up now because, it's such a heavy topic. But I remember I was like laughing through my tears. So I want to end on a happy note. And honor your mom today and every day. Can you tell us about her tattoo?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is funny. And
I'm crying, but I promise
learned,
it's funny. I'm so sorry, guys.
Yeah, no, you're good. I've learned just in doing the work that I do, because it's such a deep topic and it's a deep story that every now and then you got to have a pause for humor.
Yes.
And this is one of my pause for humors, right? My mom, she was a ordained minister. And so if you don't know what that means, she basically went to, school for the Bible and all this stuff so she can become ordained as a minister. And my mom had an embarrassing tattoo, okay? And she never told anybody because she's also working in schools now. I want to point that out too. The tattoo is on her left ankle, and it's an ice cream cone, and it says two words, and the two words are "sexy chocolate."
Reverend Sharonda
Yep.
Singleton, sexy chocolate, y'all.
Yeah.
Sexy chocolate.
Reverend Sexy Chocolate, right? Oh man. But yes, that's my mom's embarrassing tattoo. And yeah, I hope she is smiling down, proud of her son, but all three of her kids, and now her grandkids. So again, thank you for letting me in on a high note with my mom's embarrassing tattoo. And thank you guys for having me on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Chris.
much.
This was wonderful.